The much-anticipated Downton Abbey movie has premiered in London, nearly 4 years since the hit television show went off-air.
It was amazing, amazing to all be back together. I mean, we're like this big family now.
For Brits, the bickering from a bygone era offers a welcome escape, given the divisive nature of the prolonged political debate over Brexit.
People are fed up, there are more pending issues, more serious issues even than Brexit. They're not representing the people, they're representing themselves, and we are fed up, absolutely fed up with it.
The UK Parliament's 5-week suspension starts on Tuesday, following a series of legislative defeats for Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Lawmakers have rejected his proposal for a snap poll.
An election is the only way to break the deadlock in the House and to serve the national interest by giving whoever is Prime Minister the strongest possible mandate to negotiate for our country at next month's European Council.
MPs have also passed a law requiring a deal with the European Union before the UK's departure. That means the government will have to ask the bloc for another extension if the two sides fail to reach an agreement.
Government ministers have offered no explanation of the deal they are seeking, even if there is such a deal they're seeking, let alone any worked-out proposals presented to Parliament for scrutiny.
With the Commons doors sealed, the battleground shifts to Brussels, where Johnson will try to come up with new terms for the deal MPs have rejected 3 times. And he'll no doubt be hoping those negotiations result in a happily ever after ending. Paolo Montecillo, TRT World.
Well, for more on this, let's go to Geraint Johnes, a Professor of Economics at the Lancaster University Management School. Welcome back to the program, Geraint. Now, after chaotic scenes in the British Parliament is officially suspended. What do you think will happen over the next 5 weeks?
I think, Oscar, if anybody tells you what they think will happen, then they are being very rash. There's a lot of different possibilities for what might happen. One possible scenario is that Mr. Johnson goes back to negotiate a deal with the European Union. He has, after all, painted himself into something of a corner with his aggressive rhetoric surrounding no deal as a possibility for the 31st of October. And the opposition parties have ensured that that cannot take place, and they've also said that he cannot call a general election until after that time, so that no deal at that stage seems to be ruled out at this point. So he is back in a position of having to look for a deal of some kind. Now, the main kind of opposition that there was to the deal that Mrs. May, his predecessor, arranged was that concerning the Irish backstop. And that was an arrangement where effectively the whole of the UK would stay within the customs union of the European Union and would retain a lot of the single market rules until alternative arrangements could be put in place. And these alternative arrangements are largely unspecified. They're very vague. We know that they haven't been developed. The technology is not there. It's not being used elsewhere in the world. So there has to be some time before that kind of alternative arrangement comes to fruition. One possibility would be to go back to a Northern Ireland only backstop, and that would break one of Mrs. May's red lines. That is, there would have to be a border between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. Mr. Johnson might be trying to explore sectoral arrangements. So one suggestion is that he might arrange to have the backstop apply only in Northern Ireland and only to agriculture and food goods. That's unlikely to cut much ice with the European Union because they see the single market as being something that is a whole. They wouldn't want to separate out particular sectors in that way.
Now, throughout all this, Prime Minister Boris Johnson maintains that his primary goal is to reach a deal with the European Union, even though many observers, including many politicians in the opposition, claim that he really is gunning for a no-deal Brexit. What do you think is the truth here?
It certainly looked a few days ago as though he was gunning for a no-deal Brexit. The evidence suggested there wasn't a whole lot of negotiation going on. There weren't new proposals being produced by the UK that they were taking to the European Union, and he seemed to be running down the clock. Now, what has happened in Parliament since then has somewhat forced his hand, and he is now having to look for a deal in order to get out of this corner that he's painted himself into. He wants to get out of the European Union by the end of October. Now it appears he can't do that by means of a no deal, so he's more aggressively now actually starting to look for what deal might be possible. He will have to climb down one way or the other.
Interesting. Now, meantime, we're getting surprisingly positive economic news out of the UK. Wages have continued to grow at a strong pace and employment remains at record highs. But how could that situation change if there were to be a no-deal Brexit?
Yes, the labour market news today was quite favourable, a reduction in unemployment and, as you say, an increase in employees in employment. So that's good news. The news on wages is good. If you look at the favoured 3-month average measure of change in total pay, then that rose by 4% in the latest figures, which is the best kind of figures we've had on pay for a long time. That may not be sustainable, though, because productivity has been lagging in the UK, and if you want to have real pay growth period after period after period, then productivity has to increase. And it's difficult to see where this pay growth is coming from unless we can get improvements in productivity. Now, the impact of Brexit on this is unclear because we don't know what kind of Brexit we'll have. Certainly, if there was no deal, that would have an adverse impact on output and potential output in the UK, and that would make it harder to sustain these increases in real pay. So the better the Brexit deal, the more benign the Brexit deal, the better the outcome for people's incomes will be.
OK, let's see what happens over the course of the next 5 weeks. Geraint Johnes, thank you again for your analysis.